Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and today I want to show you a brand new dungeon available for this build of Shadowlands called Halls of Atonement. I did this dungeon on a couple classes, and it has a variety of different mechanics that I actually enjoy. It's really fresh, and in some sense, it gives me similar vibes to Suramar dungeons back in Legion. Nice open area, full of guards, you choose what you want to fight, and it gives you a lot of potential for mythic pluses, with some interesting boss fights, and it's going to be very interesting to see how people will take on these fights as we get them into mythics. But in today I mostly just want to showcase to you some of the dungeon, the entrance, some of the bosses and their mechanics to explain to you exactly what is going on in the alpha. This is an alpha build, so this is an early build. Good chance a lot of these bosses will function very differently. They might even change, maybe not the layout, but where the enemies are or how hard they hit, as Blizzard hasn't done any balanced tunings, but everything in this dungeon is pretty overtuned right now. Though with this group we had ourselves a very good run, a good tank that knows mechanics, and for me this was a blind run, but the mechanics were doable as the team's damage was simply just top notch. So let me show you a little bit of the mechanics. We'll start out with the first boss and how to get him to spawn. The first boss that you'll be facing off in this dungeon is Halkias. It is almost like a walking church. It has parts of a building, but then also roots, and it's like a monstrosity made out of partly building, partly nature. To spawn Halkias, you have to defeat 3 constructs, or 3 shards of Halkias, which will look very similar to the final boss himself. And as you defeat these 3 shards, they'll let out anima, which will fuel the boss. And when the boss reaches 99 or 100% of his anima, then he'll be ready to fight. As you get through the dungeon, you get to choose how you want to advance towards these constructs. And for one of them, which is the first one I'm showing you here, is a very straightforward path just to him. The other 2 you can actually bob and weave past enemies, and you might even be able to use crowd control like the Rogue Sap and Shroud of Concealment in order to get around enemies far easier. So there's going to be multiple ways for you to approach this fight, and I believe in Mythic Pluses this could be a perfect opportunity for a lot of groups to pick up on majority of the percent that you need in order to finish the dungeon. There's a variety of enemies. Most of them are going to be either casters or are going to single target your tank. So a variety of different Venthyr vampires all throughout the experience. And then of course we also have the Hound Master with 2 Gorgons. The Hound Master does range damage and should be tanked by the tank or crowd controlled if possible. The Hound Master will also enrage the Gorgons around them in order to do far more damage and really brutally assault the tank. As a rogue, I tried to see if I could de-enrage. With rogues being added mind poison for our Shiv, it transforms our Shiv into not only a slow with crippling poison, but a de-enrage utility for dungeons with mind numbing. However, on the alpha, only a portion of your poisons work with Shiv. You still get the slow from crippling poison, so you can still cripple an enemy to a 70% slow, which is huge in its own. But Shiv and interaction with mind numbing to de-enrage an enemy still does not work. Otherwise, as a rogue, it would have been great for the utility of it all. Though as Outlaw Rogue and the group that we had with the Frost Mage and the Destro Warlock, we have plenty of AoE damage to take down enemies and take their health down very quickly. We're able to single target focus down the Hound Masters and then Gorgons as last, while our tank tries to go through the defensive cooldowns in order to survive. We should have actually done this differently. We should have killed the Hound Master, then Gorgons, because they stack a pretty nasty bleed on our tank, then crowd control the rest of the enemies until that's all that's left, and then finish them off. So it's going to be interesting how different groups approach these dungeons, and in Mythic Pluses, it will kind of help determine which classes are going to be really strong here. I think Rogue is still going to be a very strong class for this expansion of Shadowlands, particularly Mythic Plus. The AoE capability of Outlaw at least, but also the Phantom Knights capability of your Assassination Rogues, and maybe some AoE capability of Subtlety with now actual AoE tools, you still might be able to bring quite a lot, plus the de-enrage that Rogue brings with Shiv. If it works on the alpha, it would be huge. With the final shard defeated, all we have to do is wait for that bar at the top to fill up. You'll see red anima kind of shooting out of the shard that's dead, and it'll be going into the boss, and all you have to do is get it to 100%, but essentially you can only get it to 99%. But once the bar is filled, then the boss will be available for attacks. You do have these collectors around the boss, and when you wait for the bar to fill up, he will obliterate the collectors and you can begin the boss fight. But in Mythic Pluses, what you can do is you can pull these guys a little bit early, and I would guess the collectors will also give percentage if you decide to pull them early. So in this dungeon, you'll be able to choose which mobs you want to fight. Collectors are a little bit interesting. You will need to have some sort of crowd control on their ability to collect sins, as they'll just spawn a bunch of animated sins all around you. With the AoE caps that a variety of classes are getting in Shadowlands, it's going to be much more difficult to deal with a massive trash pack like this, as you just simply won't be just nearly as efficient. With a Frost Mage and a Outlaw Rogue and a Destro Warlock, the Destro Warlock and Frost Mage are able to do quite a lot of damage to an unlimited amount of enemies, but for Outlaw I'm trying to burst down the 4 enemies that I can tag at the time. And then it's time for the boss. The boss looks awesome and has really cool mechanics. I very much enjoyed the fight, and Blizzard will probably change his visuals slightly. But one of the things the boss will do is he will drop down rubble on the ground. You don't want to stand next to this rubble, because that will do damage to you, and he will try to target enemies that are furthest apart from him or casters in general, but unless your group is full melee, then he'll start dropping down on you. However, the boss room to fight Halkias is quite large, and you're able to move him around quite all over the place. He'll also use an ability of fear which can be dispelled, but my priest at the time did not dispel it, so I had to eat the damage and then got an absorption shield at most. Then Halkias will start doing the spinny thing, which sometimes he will reverse the direction of which way he is spinning. I found this out on another character that sometimes he will just reverse it randomly. So you will need to pay attention of where he is and where the spins are. But you also need to pay attention to the rubble on the ground. You want to make sure as he's doing the spinny thing, forcing everybody to run circles, that you're not running over the rubble as well. And dealing with the fear is quite easy. And I wonder what kind of mechanics this guy will have on Mythic as well. I'm pretty sure there will be some sort of an overlapping mechanic that might make the fear more deadly. Maybe when you dispel the fear, it does AoE damage. But the boss was really easy. I did not have to look up the mechanics prior, and it was very enjoyable to play. We go up a bit for the courtyard, and in the courtyard there's a lot of stone-born gargoyles, and all of them have very interesting effects. Part of their effects is going to be where they'll turn stone form, where they'll take 50% less damage, so you will need a class that is able to deal with this. So if you're playing on the Horde, Blood Oath is still looking like it's going to be a solid choice for Mythic Pluses going forward, unless Blizzard ends up adjusting the Blood Oath ratio yet again this expansion. What's cool about this is you can choose which enemies you want to fight, so you don't really have to go and clear the whole area. You'll have some enemies that are patrolling around, so you will be able to pick the fights you want. If you're a caster, then these Stoneborn guys, for the most part, are going to be your biggest challenge. They'll sometimes throw glaives at the casters, interrupting their casts. There's nothing that really says they're about to throw a glaive or if they're preparing to throw one, so sometimes it takes certain casters by complete surprise. Pretty sure we'll have weak auras and other timers from add-ons like Deadly Boss mods or Big Wigs, or for dungeons, Little Wigs, that will give casters a rough estimate of when these enemies are about to use their interrupt. But it is an interesting ability and will definitely create some very tough situations if your healer gets interrupted during a pretty massive trash pull in Mythic Plus. The second boss of the dungeon is called Echelon, and he has a couple different mechanics. Most of them are going to deal with ranged, but some are melee oriented. So for this fight, we actually had way too much DPS in order to burn him down, but this guy is fairly overtuned on the alpha. One of the things he will do is he will target a ranged, or hopefully a ranged character further out from him, and he'll spawn a pool of blood that will radiate with shadow damage. He targeted our Warlock's Imp, so none of us really had to worry about. Then he will summon a bunch of adds that don't really ever die when they're slain. Instead, they become a rock formation and they just sit there dormant. It's really easy to get overwhelmed with a variety of adds, as these guys are never truly dying. They will just regenerate health and they'll come out and start fighting you again, usually bolstered by another set of adds. So instead of fighting, let's say 6 enemies, you'll now be fighting 12, as this guy will continuously spawn adds for you to fight. So what you're supposed to do is try to deal with this leap ability he does. You're supposed to force him to leap onto the adds in order to obliterate them, but at the time I had no idea that that's what you were supposed to do. Another thing to also concern yourself is when he's about to leap on you, you'll get a curse, and then eventually will turn you to stone, stunning you in location that you are at. Right now the timer for this ability is very short, so sometimes you'll get stunned and he'll leap on top of you with you having nowhere to go. Also, every time these adds die, or quote-unquote die, but rather become untargetable, they will also radiate extra damage to the group. This means this is mostly a healer fight, and somewhat of a positional fight, but for healer it's going to be massive AoE damage that's going out, but also you'll have to be conscious of the space that you have, so that's a lot of mechanics for a single boss. Just imagine how long you'll have to do the song and dance on a tyrannical week with a boss like this. So we continue on into the Halls of Atonement towards the High Priestess. First of all, the High Priestess is in a really awesome looking room, and you can use the full area that she is in at the top of the stairs and even at the bottom to guide the boss around. So this boss has a couple different mechanics. This boss is a caster. It will try to cast at your tank a ability that will do a bit of shadow damage. So you'll want to make sure you have your interrupts available or have cooldowns available for every time she casts. She also summons ghosts from time to time, and these ghosts are interesting. They work very much similar to a Luigi's Mansion type of ghosts, where if you look at them, they turn invisible and they stop approaching you. However, these ghosts also radiate AoE damage. It is supposed to be that these ghosts are supposed to radiate AoE damage within 8 yards of them, but instead they actually radiate throughout the full room unless I misread the instructions. Now you also have these soul vessels around the adds, and what you can do is you can essentially kite these adds into these vessels, which will remove the add altogether. But you only have 4 soul vessels. So the idea is you're supposed to clear out the room and kill the boss before you are overwhelmed with all these adds. However, if the adds kill somebody, whoever they are tethered to, they will then start roaming around the room just trying to attack enemies indiscriminately. So it'll make the fight a lot more difficult. So having precision and having cooldowns lined up for this fight, for the playstyle that it offers, is going to be very important. Of course, we ended up having way too much damage in order to be able to avoid certain mechanics, but in the future, this is going to be a very long-term fight with a limited amount of immunities, I guess, in order to help your team. So in a tyrannical week, I do wonder how people are going to deal with these adds. Right now they are unCCable, so there's no way to easily make these adds less threatening, but maybe Blizzard will change it up in the future. Having a limited amount of vessels for you to use on the ghost adds that will continuously radiate AoE damage is a little bit of a tough one. It just might be one of those fights where you'll need to wait outside and fight a bunch of enemies, collect percentages, and wait until you have Bloodlust available in order to burn through the boss. Because when you start falling apart, this is just going to get harder and harder. We then have this cool mini-boss called Inquisitor Cigar, and what he'll do is he'll drain all the ghosts around him for extra health. Essentially, this guy is invulnerable as long as there's someone for him to drain, and you'll continuously spawn adds as long as there's someone for him to kill. So essentially in this room you'll want to AoE all the adds that are around, all those tormented souls, in order to make sure he doesn't have any fuel for the fire. And that's essentially what we had to do. While I was trying to set up my assassination spec for the next boss, I was trying to figure out exactly what abilities should go where, so it was a little bit of a hectic situation. But this guy wasn't all that difficult. It was interesting that they put him here because the next boss doesn't have any of the same mechanics. Sometimes Blizzard likes to put in certain bosses in order to show you, hey, this is more or less how this mechanic works. This guy ended up being kind of a mini boss of his own. I wonder if he'll be as difficult as the King's Rest Zul when it comes to mythic pluses, but I guess only time will tell. And the final boss is a very interesting one. It's going to be Lord Chamberlain. What he will do is he will have statues around the room that you fight him in on the balcony, and he'll be able to move the statues around from time to time. Just make sure you don't stand in front of the statues. He'll also be putting a nasty debuff on the tank, and that's going to be summoned for the tank and the healer to manage throughout the fight. He also will use an ability called Doorway to Shadows at certain health thresholds, and he'll start moving statues around and make him into a crisscross section, which is going to be different than where it started. He also uses an ability Ritual of Woe, which essentially works like a Battle for Azeroth Temple of Sithralis third boss. He'll channel at a pylon, and as the pylon gets channeled into, he'll radiate AoE damage. What you're supposed to do, which we'll figure out later, is stand in front of him. So then only one ally takes damage from his ability instead of doing AoE damage to you. And again, at breakpoints, he is going to shuffle the statues around a little bit and then throw them back at you, continuously channeling Channel of Woe. He also has this other ability where he will radiate AoE, so you'll have to step away from the guy. And he will also have a frontal cone where he will target an ally, which is really difficult to see right now this early on the alpha since the visual isn't all that clear. And he'll basically just throw a frontal cone in front of you. Just don't stand next to the guy that is being channeled into. and that's essentially the boss. I do wonder how his mechanics are going to be on Mythic, but it seemed like a refreshing boss compared to all the other bosses. So far, every other boss felt like kind of a DPS race, where you're just trying to beat them before the mechanics overwhelm you, which I think would be very stressful in a Mythic Plus setting, but this is Alpha, so there's a good chance this guy will change a bit. But the environment for this dungeon was awesome. I really got the Suramar vibes from it, but more of a Transylvania Suramar vibes, more Van Helsing with vampires instead of just night elves looking for a little bit extra mana. So it was very interesting and I enjoyed it a lot. I thought the environment was great, the abilities were awesome, some fresh cool new mechanics that you have seen before but used in different interesting ways that was super enjoyous to play. Anyway guys, thank you so much for checking out this video. This was the Halls of Atonement, and I'll make another video on other dungeons when they come out for future builds of BFA Alpha. Thank you guys so much for watching, hope you enjoyed. I'll see all of you guys in another video.